hiring committees. We know it's a big investment of your time. It requires a lot of dedication and some learning and knowledge and some participation in large events like this. So thank you for being here and for being fully engaged. We appreciate it. So I have a few things just to open up with before I turn this over to Sandy. But I just wanted to show you the list of our 20 full-time faculty recruitments that we're handling this season. So it's a big load. That's why we have such a big crowd here today. We have 4 that have closed already. And then we have 2 closing next week. And then our final posting closes on March 10th. And after all those closing dates, our work begins, right? We'll have a lot to do with our interviews, our assessments, and our selection process. So we have a few months ahead of us where we'll be delving into this work. While we're talking about the recruitment process, I wanted to give you a few reminders. So the first one is that this is a change that came from some a legal recommendation that we received last year. I don't know how many of you were here to hear Laura Shulkin speak, but her recommendation is that we do not allow the sharing of firsthand information about our candidates. So I wanted to make sure that those of you that weren't here last year for the training heard that from us directly. So I know you all probably have a lot of questions about that and maybe not agree with that as a process. So I wanted to explain to you how that process works in human resources. So it's not to say that you shouldn't share firsthand information at all, but we don't want committee members influencing other committee members with their own information and biases that might not be entirely comprehensive in terms of showing what these candidates are capable for. So if you have positive or negative comments that you want to share about a candidate, I invite you to share them with me. And then if that candidate reaches a point where they're being considered as a finalist, I will advise the final interviewers that I have information to share, but I'm not going to share that information until they're about to make a decision. So they will have already interviewed, met, spoken with, and observed that candidate and all of their application materials prior to hearing any information from anyone else so that they can make a decision or come to a decision. And then if that person is under consideration as a finalist, then I will advise them what I've learned from you. And then they can make a fully informed decision. I've had this come up a couple of times so far with classified recruitments, and in both cases, the person didn't end up being a finalist, and so the information, I'm going to say the process panned itself out, and the information really didn't need to be shared in a way that needed to sway anyone anyway. Those things tend to vet themselves out throughout the process. So do any of you have any questions about how that works or what to do if you have firsthand knowledge that you feel that needs to be shared? Okay, good. If any questions come up, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm the CEO rep for a committee, so that I want to make sure they understand what that means. So it means that if a member of the committee starts telling a personal experience that they had with a candidate, then they cannot do that. Like if it's, let's say, an associate who, and they know something about the associate, they evaluated one of the classes, they cannot say anything about it. I just want to
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so it can be the hiring manager, it could even be any of the committee members. We've all talked about it now, but ultimately the EEO rep is charged with keeping the process fair and equitable for everyone. And we believe this enhances that process. Go ahead, Claudia.
Is there a way that you can change mics because the noise is really
bad? Do we have another one? Sorry.
They're both on. No,
This is for the camera.
turn this off and then turn that back on.
Oh, we have 2 mics running. Okay, sorry. I didn't realize both mics were on. Sorry about that. I can't hear it because I'm talking.
still need to put it closer though.
Closer. Okay. All right. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about, and if you do think of any other questions or concerns about this new way of processing firsthand knowledge, please feel free to contact me at any point. The next thing I wanted to share is, this is new, but it goes back a few years, is that Human Resources is only screening your applicants for minimum qualifications. So we're not screening application packets for completeness. So if you're getting a packet and some pieces are missing, documents that you've asked for, maybe they forgot to attach their resume or a cover letter or something along those lines, it's because we've decided that in order to be inclusive, we want the committee to go ahead and evaluate that candidate, and you can rank them according to the completeness of their packet and how well they've conveyed their knowledge, skills, and abilities to you with the materials that they submitted. So, so don't think that, that they're in error. It is intentional. But if you do see someone that you think really doesn't qualify, alert us to that concern as well, because we do make mistakes. So, and then finally, just a reminder that when you're selecting your interview candidates, you're required to rank the top 10 candidates in the applicant pool. And if any of our current associate faculty are among the top 10, then they must be interviewed. And it doesn't matter what discipline they're in. So even if it's in a different discipline, if they're a current associate faculty member, they're entitled to an interview. Okay. Any questions? All right. Yes.
If they're in our final top 10.
Yes. Correct. Okay, those were all of my updates. Again, thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Sandy, and she's going to talk with you about equivalency. So I'm just going to leave that on.
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about MiraCosta's equivalency process, and a lot of you are already familiar with it. For some of you, this is new information. But as the slide says, equivalency is required if an applicant, if their degree isn't not an exact match for a degree that's listed in the minimum qualifications handbook of the state chancellor's office. And when we say exact, we do mean word for word. MiraCosta is very literal when it comes to equivalency. I would say that, the obvious equivalencies are when a degree is very different from one of the stated degrees on the list. But I've provided 3 examples for you of ones where you might think, why do these require equivalency? So 3 different disciplines. There's counseling first, there's film studies, and then mathematics. The first one for counseling happened a couple years ago. Guidance counseling is a master's degree that is listed on the chancellor's list. An applicant had a degree in guidance and counseling. That is still considered an equivalency. Second, film, and we have a film studies position. There are bound to be many equivalencies. Film is an acceptable master's from the state's point of view. If somebody has a degree in cinema, that will also be an equivalency, etc. The last one is mathematics. The acceptable master's degree are a degree in mathematics or applied math. Somebody who's recently going through equivalency has a degree in mathematical sciences. So we just wanted to make you aware that it may not seem common sense that those are equivalencies, but they are here at MiraCosta. Okay. So what kicks off the formal equivalency process? It's not that the applicant has applied, it's when you as a committee actually select an equivalency candidate to interview, and then right away your recruiter will be contacting the equivalency candidate to help them prepare their request for the formal equivalency process. And by prepare, we mean sometimes applicants don't provide all of the supporting documentation that's required. Sometimes they apply under the wrong guidelines. Sometimes they provide an equivalency that they went through at Palomar because they don't understand that even though we're all community colleges, that Palomar's process is different from ours. As far as the next flow of the equivalency process, we also will reach out to either the department chair or discipline expert. We're going to need your written letter of support for the candidate's equivalency request. Next, So the expectation and the goal is that the equivalency committee will review the request prior to the candidate being interviewed. So sometimes that's a tight turnaround. You select your candidates. We're hustling to talk to the interview candidate to get their equivalency ready to go. And that is why we ask for 3 weeks, more or less, from when you select your candidates to when they're interviewed. The next part of the process, and so during the full-time faculty full-time faculty recruitment period, the equivalency committee will be meeting every week, so we can move the process along pretty quickly. And that last bullet, after the equivalency committee's review, then their review and recommendation goes next to Academic Senate. And we do try to get Senate approval prior to the interview, but that's not always possible. We do try, though, our best to make sure that we have AS approval before the final interview, because if that's the person that they want to offer the job to, we want to be able to do that with full confidence that they're going to get through the process. Okay. So next, we're going to cover the screening criteria form. I think many of you have been serving recently on classified hiring committees. And with our new applicant tracking system for classified positions, we have embedded the screening criteria into the online system, and that's where all of the review is being done. We're not going to be doing that with your faculty recruitments. So just as has been done in the past, your screening form will be outside of the system. And we'll show you a sample screening form in just a minute. The first bullet has to do with the EEO diversity rubric being required. So what's that? So I think it was last year that Luke introduced a rubric which would allow hiring committee members to evaluate or score each applicant's response to our EEO diversity question. And some of your committees used it last year in your screening. This year it will be mandatory, and so we'll be sending you a sample of the screening criteria form. I think some of your recruiters have already done that. It'll show you what the rubric is, and we'll cover that in just a minute. Number 2 is, don't forget that your screening criteria must be based on what is in the job posting, because you cannot expect an applicant to respond to a qualification that wasn't mentioned in the posting. Okay, so please be careful about that. Second bullet, so we ask that you turn in your screening forms at the meeting when your interview candidate is selecting when your committee is selecting interview candidates. And that would make sense, right? Because in order for you to select your candidates, you want to have your screening sheets with you. So please turn in your screening sheets at that time. And last, I guess we'll just actually go to the screening form itself. So as I mentioned, your recruiter is going to send you something that looks like this. And this is just a template. You can use it to help you create your own screening criteria. You can edit it. You can totally overhaul it. So it's fine as long as you include the diversity rubric, which Sean is showing you down there. One other thing that has changed is that last or next to last criteria that says overall applicant rating. For those of you who already received our initial screening form, we were going to put the overall applicant rating in the applicant system. We have changed that. So we'll send you a revised form. So what this means is for your overall applicant rating, we still recommend that you put that on your screening sheet. You can use what we've suggested, the poor, below, average, average, good, excellent, or you could go back to what many committees use, which is interview, yes, no, maybe, or you can totally customize it to your needs. So we'll leave that entirely up to you. We can also send you materials from your previous recruitments. Some of you have hired recently. We can send you your past interview questions and screening criteria so that you don't have to totally reinvent the wheel. Just ask your recruiter for that if they don't send it to you. The rest of the fields up on the form are pretty standard, right? You can evaluate applicants on the materials that they've included, their education, experience, desirable qualifications. That's it for me, really riveting information. Any questions about equivalency or the screening form?
For the overall applicant rating
does the committee need to agree that everyone on that committee has the same type of rating, or could individuals within it have something different?
I would say best practice would be that you all agree on a particular rating system. If you have a large pool of applicants, in the past, many committees have used a number system. So they say interview, yes is 3, maybe is 2 points, no is 1. And the nice thing about doing that and assigning a numerical score is you can create a master spreadsheet at the end. All committee members send their ratings to the committee chairperson. That person puts it in a spreadsheet, totals up everything, and then you can sort by the totals. And then you can easily see where the applicants break out in terms of, these are the top, everyone said yes, and so yeah, we're probably going to interview all of them. These are all no's. And then the discussion usually happens in the middle where there's more, yeses and no's and maybes. So that would, but if anyone has a different experience, it'd be great if you can share that. No? Okay, any other questions? Okay, then I'm going to turn this over next to Jessica. She's going to introduce you to the new applicant system.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you guys just a short overview of our new upgraded applicant tracking system that we're just started using spring this past year. So just a few points that we want to touch on. I know in the past you guys are used to in our old system that you would use one login. Everyone would use the same login that we would send out to you guys in an email. But now in this new updated system, each committee member is assigned a unique login that you're going to use to log into the system. We think that you'll find that it's a much more intuitive and user-friendly interface. You can now use the browser back and forward buttons as well as the breadcrumbs, so it's a lot easier to navigate than the old system was. And then we suggest that you use either Chrome or Firefox when you are using the system because Edge and Internet Explorer do not work well with the system. Okay, so this is a view basically of what it's going to look like when you log into the system. And you'll see when you're actually assigned as a committee member, you will receive an email that's generated by the system, which will give you instructions on how to log in and also more detailed instructions on how to navigate the system. But basically, once you log in, it's going to look like this. In the corner there, you'll see the user group, and you're going to want to make sure that your user group is set to search committee member because automatically when you log in, it's going to default to employee. So please just make sure it's set to search committee member. And then from that point, you're going to be able to access the actual postings that you are assigned to. So if you can go into postings there and then faculty. Sorry, it's moving a little bit slowly. And then you'll be able to see any postings that you have access to here. So if you go ahead and click on the name of the posting, okay, and then just a little tip here, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that add to watch list there. If you go ahead and click that link, it'll make it so when you initially log into that home page that the posting will show up right there on the home page, which is nice, especially for those of you that are serving on multiple committees. Okay, so from here, you're going to navigate over to the Applicants tab. And this is how you're going to start to review applicants. So you'll see here, and I know that Sandy touched on this, where it says the evaluative criterion status, it says not available. That's because, like we said, we are currently using the evaluative criteria within the system for classified recruitments, but we have decided not to use the evaluative criteria within the system for faculty recruitments at this time. It is coming, but not at this time. So you guys will still be doing your paper forms. But the way that we suggested, there's a few different ways that you can access the applications at this point. You can click on the application as well as all the documents here, but how we suggest you do it is you can go ahead and click on the applicant's last name there, and that will open up their application. At this point, you can start screening the applicant's application, looking at all their information, education, work history. And then as you get down towards the bottom, or here's a supplemental question also where you'll find the diversity question. And then down at the bottom here is all of the required as well as any optional documents that you guys requested. And if you just click on any of those links, it'll open each of those documents up in a separate tab for you. So it's a great, easy way to look at the applicant's application and all of their documents. And then another item we wanted to point out is this recommendations tab here. So we're going to ask that you guys please disregard this. Although it says recommendations, how it's actually set up is for a place for the applicant to list their references, so much as they would on a resume or a CV. So we thought we had disabled this function. We realized that we hadn't, so we have gone back in and disabled it at this point. But there are a few applicants who had already entered information in here, so we ask that you please just disregard that. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar. We actually use a third-party reference check system called Skill Survey for our reference checks at the finalist stage, and that's a much more in-depth, review of the applicant. So you can just go ahead and disregard that. Okay. Anything I'm forgetting? I think so. Okay. Okay, and so that's pretty much it. These are just all our contacts. We asked that if you guys have any specific questions about your individual recruitment, if you would just please contact the recruiter that is assigned to your recruitment. Okay, questions? Yes?
Do you have that combination function that I used on a previous committee?
Oh, yes, I'm sure. Yeah, I forgot to touch on that. So if you want to go back into the system, you can combine the candidate's application as well as all their attachments into one document. So there at the very bottom, you'll see this combined document, and you just click that generate button, and then it'll generate a PDF of their application and all the attachments for you. So you can view it that way if you prefer. Okay, any other questions?
This would be a question for Lori or Charlie. So we heard a lot today about the importance of having students as part of the process. And then I was approached during the break by several different people who have done that all in different ways and all had different limitations or things, in terms of what they could or couldn't do or what they were told by HR. Can you give us some standard guidance if we would like to do that? How do we schedule that? How many students can we have? Do we have to vet them? Do they have to represent certain groups? Can they be given extra credit for that? Can be given at least 10? Can they do a student survey that becomes part of our evaluation? A lot of questions involving that. I mean, I know it seems problematic to have us each do something different. So it might be something that, I don't want to open a word's nest, but I do think we need guidance on that.
Okay, so consider it importance, that's and we have done this, historically with the committees, individual committees have requested it, and we don't have any specific guidelines around that. What we know in HR is that it takes a lot of resources from the HR department logistically to support that. And so we certainly aren't prepared to do a massive institutionalization of that process, at least not yet. We have done it on a Wednesday, Tuesday kind of basis for particular interest of the committee, so because of that we don't have any guidelines. But based on what we heard today, certainly I was also part of some of those discussions, around lunch. And so it's something that we're now looking at. And we see that if there's an appetite for it, then certainly we should probably work together on figuring out how we might produce some guidelines, some expectations around what is appropriate, all the details that you mentioned about how many and who and where and what and when, all those sorts of things. So I guess my response will be, we'll go back and take a look at it, see what we can do. We might be able to do an implementation of 1 or 2 again for this particular recruitment, but we might be better prepared for something more larger scale in the coming years, maybe next year or something like that. But like right now, we certainly aren't staffed to do anything more than what we've already done in the past, which has been a 1 or 2 kind of thing at the moment. Yes.
I was wondering, it's not in the original announcement. Are we allowed to do that as a part of the interview process? Can we, in other words, if it's not already implemented, are we out of luck in terms of the call, or is that a separate process, like the teaching?
I guess the question is, when we've done that, was it included in the announcement? How did they?
It's not.
Announcement, okay.
No, we tell them when we call them, we find them correct.
Sorry?
But we let them, so, yeah.
So, typically we don't include that students would be participating. We don't include that in the job posting. However, by the time we actually call candidates and invite them to interview, that's usually when we notify them, or when we send them a prompt for the teaching demo. It will say, you'll be doing the teaching demo in the presence of real students. The committee members will be observing. So we do give them a heads up about that. Usually they're very excited. It's easier to teach the students than to your peers, kind of. But like Charlie said, it's a little difficult to institutionalize. We've done some departments, biology, kinesiology, did yoga demonstrations in the boardroom, had students participate, but it is a lot to coordinate, including on your part, to round up students and get their participation. Oftentimes, because the interviews might be 2 days, you can't get the same students for every interview, so there might be some variability. But committees have commented that it's very helpful to see the students' interaction with the candidates and how the candidates interact with the students. And that's the part that they felt was very helpful. Some committees have asked students to fill out surveys. I'm not actually sure how much they got from that. And other committees, they just wanted to observe the interaction, how well the candidate could connect with students. So we've had different times that we've done it, but maybe not enough to know exactly how to lay that out for you. But if you, yeah.
Sure.
So, in the past, have students who participate in this, have they been aware of what they're participating in? Because of the privacy issue that you guys asked?
Yeah, so that's another
How do
component.
you guarantee that they can keep privacy?
So then HR also has to schedule a training with the students. And so if they're not the same students the whole day, we go, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. But we do apprise them of, this is the entire process. This is a big commitment to hire a faculty member. Please be pleasant and interact with them, make them feel comfortable. And we do notify them about the confidentiality of the process, that the names, if the names are disclosed to them, that they not share anything that the candidates might have shared. So we do try to make them aware of that. We're very cognizant of training the students.
The hiring, we were allowed to ask a clarification question. In the last 2 cycles I was on, I was said, no, you cannot ask a clarification once that person is given an answer. Yet your speaker says, of course, it's common sense to ask a clarification. You're trying to get to know the candidate better. What's the policy, and may I ask or may I not?
You may ask. And yeah, so I'm trying to remember when, I feel like this may have, no, perhaps not. So follow-up questions around questions that have already been asked are okay. So for example, you ask them, tell us about your experience, and they told you something that, they touched on it, but you want to know more about that experience. It is okay for you to say, tell me more about that experience, right? That's fine. But you don't turn the question into something completely different that's, that wasn't kind of already prepared for. So it's really around, you've asked the question, and even, Eugene went as far as to say, if you have even application materials that you want to follow up on, they've disclosed, they've shared with the committee, that, hey, I did this, I did that. He was sort of leaving it saying that you could ask a follow-up question on that because it's not unfair to ask a follow-up question in the spirit of this is your application materials, I want to know about that particular thing. So we haven't dealt with that particular issue yet, so that'll be another thing I guess we'll work with, but for now, it is definitely okay for you to ask follow-up questions of questions that you've already asked. Just don't invent new questions. That would be unfair to other people.
In previous committees that I've served, we weren't allowed to clarify any questions. Like we would read the question, and if the candidate said, I don't understand, can you rephrase it? We could only reread the question. Is that something that we should do? Or?
Yeah, so no, if you rephrase the question to help get an understanding, that is okay.
Okay.
But it's different if someone says, for example, tell us about your experience teaching underrepresented students. And they say, I don't really understand the question. And you say, I don't know, tell us how you taught something else that's completely unrelated. And that's not a clarification question, right? That's just a different question. But if you can rephrase it so that really it's the same question, you have to use your judgment on that too, right?
Like if they ask, what do you mean by underrepresented students?
Yes, you can give examples of that. Yeah, sure, you can give some examples of that. And that may tell you something, and that may not tell you something, right? But sure, if they're not familiar with the definition, it's okay to elaborate on that. So I'll give you an example of that. There was some time ago, I was interviewing someone who was not familiar with the term at the time. It was total quality management, TQM. It was a kind of a continuous improvement kind of process that was not, that was kind of a movement for certain positions around in business. And they really didn't know what it was, which was fine, but they didn't say, I don't know. They said, could you tell me more about that? I'm not sure what that is. And so you tell them, and then they might be able to speak some experiences. Maybe it wasn't called that for them, right? It's called something different. Oh yeah, I did, actually I've done that, it just wasn't called that. So yeah, it's okay, just as long as you provide some clarity on it, that's fine. That's fine. Any other questions?
Charlie?
Yes.
Don't we need to be careful about going beyond clarifications to prompts?
Sorry?
Don't we need to be careful about going beyond clarifications to giving prompts? That if somebody asked for that question, but somebody else may have the same question and they don't ask it, and we only answer the one who did, then aren't the interviews starting to deviate in terms of how they're all being treated and
I don't
the way
think
that
it's
the questions
not,
are being asked?
if it's truly about clarification, if someone wants to know what that is, and they're engaged in that question, I don't think that it is unfair to give a response on something. And because some candidate didn't ask, like we don't know what they're thinking, we don't know if they know or if they don't know, we don't know that. It is a relationship kind of experience, so they have to say something if they don't know. And if someone doesn't know and they have the wherewithal to actually ask the question, I don't think it's inappropriate to not answer the question. It was really around clarification. But if they dig into something, they dig into a question and it goes beyond clarification, and they want to know, unless it's the time of where do you have any questions for us at the end, where you kind of offer that as alternative for information. Because they could ask that question then, I suppose, right? I didn't ask that question before a long time ago, but now that I have a question, I now want to ask that, and then it's okay for you to answer that question. I think it's okay if someone asks a question and they don't know, it may be terminology, it may be whatever it is, they just want to know, what do you mean? And if you can answer it, I don't think it's unfair. And I don't think that when we say unfair, I don't think that there will be any issues around, look, we're trying to get to know each other, and you asking that question and us responding is not going to put us in jeopardy of anything legal or discrimination or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, I want to draw that distinction between, what is fair, what is legal, and what are we trying to get accomplished for both of us.
I was also meaning to reference like follow-ups to them and, crossing the line between asking clarifying questions versus giving them prompts. 'Cause if we start asking, I didn't quite hear enough, ask more, are we doing that with all the candidates? Doesn't it start to become potentially unfair? Like how do we maintain that kind of
I would say that as long as you're sticking, I think it is okay if you're getting an understanding on a particular question, you're just trying to get some particular depth, and you're just not satisfied with one candidate, but you were with another, then I think it's okay to ask that question as long as it's consistent with clarification or I just need to know more about what you're saying. So if you simply say, please tell me more, can you explain more about that? Can you give me an example of that? I think that is all okay. I don't think that's an unfair advantage, yes.
So I think we're talking about two things, and I want to offer something on both ends. Regards to a candidate asking a clarifying question, to make it fair, at the start of the interview, we would say it's okay to ask clarifying questions because I was told by my mentors they're not going to ask any follow-up or any kind of questions, so you have to know what to say and be ready. So I would not have asked a clarifying question because I've been coached not to. So we would have to put that up front at the start of the interview so that everybody knows I can ask a question. Just like we tell our students, hey, come with me. You invite them to ask questions, and you hope they'll have the agency to do so. So that would be my offer for that. And then in terms of the follow-up, I don't know if it's from an administrative standpoint, maybe for each candidate, one person on the committee is the, tracking how we're engaging with that person. Like, how many follow-up questions did we see an imbalance in how the committee handled one candidate over another? And is that something, it's helping us to be aware of our biases and our behaviors in the moment with each candidate, and then reflecting on it at the end of the interview.
I think those are great points, thank you.
It's a slippery slope because what is clarification to one member of the committee could be giving them an undue advantage to another member of the committee, which is why I think that was something that was kind of frowned upon, that in your clarification, it crossed the line into helping the person hear the answer that the committee wants to hear or needs to hear. And I don't know.
Okay, so let me speak to that because I have seen that where it has crossed the line. So where the bias comes in into play with this question, and someone says, "Hey, tell us about how do you accomplish this," or whatever the question was, and they give an answer, and they feel like it's insufficient. They want to hear more because there's this bias in play that they may or may not realize. And so then I've seen the question go from, "Can you tell us more?" to, "Well, wasn't there a time when you did this?" And it becomes a leading question that is truly a prompt, as opposed to just simply tell me more about what you just said. Or can you just give me some examples of what you said? There's some judgment in that. I think at the end of the day, the committee members, it's not just the EO reps, but all the committee members should kind of be really aware of the dynamics in the room and what's in play, and kind of if there's something that seems uncomfortable to anyone in the committee, they should feel free to be able to at least acknowledge to the EO rep, say, "Hey, I feel uncomfortable about this," kind of have a signal for that, so that you can address that. But I think at the end of the day, as long as you understand that you're not trying to provide leading questions that are going to elicit a positive or a negative response, "Didn't you do this?" or "How about that?" or whatever, but it is simply, "I don't know that I've heard enough specifically about your candidacy. If you give me an example, it might help me understand kind of what your experiences or your knowledge, your skills, or abilities." And those are really the key points. And as long as you're touching those, as long as you are touching their knowledge, skills, and abilities, then it's fair play, right? The unfair play comes into when you are going beyond that. It becomes about something that is completely unrelated and borderline discriminatory, if not discriminatory. I mean, that's where it really goes off the rails. So most people have good judgment around that. I have seen an example where someone has gone on and said, "This, leading questions, that kind of thing," and that is definitely should not do. And I would have I would encourage the committees to strongly talk about that before you start your interview. Have an expectation in that committee. What's our norm going to be around how deep a dive we're going to go on follow-up questions? We know that it is, from a legal standpoint, that's okay. So HR is telling you, from a legal standpoint, follow-up questions are okay, right? So now it's about, okay, well, how fair or not are you going to treat a particular candidate, right? And is it going to be, is there going to be some bias around that? And as long as it's not discriminatory in nature, and it's getting you to the knowledge, skills, and ability, you have some more leeway than you've had before, at least the way that we've trained in terms of our expectations.
Yeah, since candidate can ask for clarification, right? Let's say candidate start answering the question. You understand as clearly, this candidate didn't understand the question. They're going off. Can you tell them, no, you didn't get the question, this is what we meant to say. Is that okay?
Well, I generally don't get in the way of that.
They misunderstand the question, we can't.
Yeah, so if it's yes, okay, so if it's a clear misunderstanding,
yeah, that's what I said.
right? It's a clear, like, I did not understand, and it's, it happens. Okay, so there's a difference. There's one where you misunderstand it. There's one you flat out give the wrong answer, right? And usually you can get things. You know that. So I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on the person that they just flat out answered the question wrong, and you're kind of like, but that's versus they misunderstood the terminology, something around whatever it is. I think it's okay to kind of say, I just want you to be sure this is that, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time on that because they still. In some cases I've seen that's where they actually don't know the answer, right? And it's not about clarification. It's not that they didn't understand the question. They really don't know the answer. And so I've also seen where someone spends a lot of time trying to get them there. No, I meant this. They still didn't get it. No, I meant that. It's kind of like, stop. They don't know the answer. Next question, right? They don't know the answer. Yes.
Well, it's just a comment. I've been on some committees that because of the follow-up question, then the candidate doesn't have enough time to answer the other question. So I just want to encourage everybody to be mindful that even if you ask follow-up questions, they still have the same amount of time to answer questions. If you spend too much time on a question, then they have to rush with the other questions, and that's not fair to the candidate.
That is correct, and thank you for saying that, because that can get out of, people can lose track of time. So that's why you have a time monitor as well, and that sort of thing. So again, when you're having your committees, have that discussion. We're going to go ahead and follow-up questions or whatever that is, to try and be fair to everyone around that. You definitely don't want to lose track of time and not give someone an opportunity to get through the entire process of the interview that you've scheduled out and laid out for all their activities that they're going to do. Anything else? Is there someone else? Oh, yes.
What do you guys think about the idea of making all of the applicants anonymous and just review candidates by number? Is that something that could be easily implemented? Maybe not for this time, but for future.
Yeah, so the idea that we heard today about initials, that was the first time I've heard that idea, so I'm intrigued about that. I've heard of some districts considering actually trying to hide the names of the application materials before they give it to the committee, but that's a lot of paperwork that we're not resourced to do that at all. But we have an interest in it. We believe that what he said around the science around bias is real. I think it does matter. And so we will work with the Senate and everyone else to see what we can do about improving the removing of barriers around bias in our hiring process. So,
I really like that.
Yeah, no, so so I was intrigued by it as well. It's something we're going to take a look at. Any other questions? We're done? Like, done. Y'all are free.